Hello. Well, on the 27th of June, the night of the 27th of June this year, I was invited to read a story from my short story book for the Sapphic Writers Collective. And this was a group of Sapphic writers, and it was going to be recorded. Well, it was recorded, but apparently they couldn't get sufficient permissions from all the other people who contributed to actually release it. So I thought I'd record something myself, because I am out, as they used to call it. Or I don't know if they still do. But anyway, this is one of the stories that I called The March, in a book of short stories based on my own experiences as a working class lesbian woman in the 70s. Well, you know, what class of lesbian you were was very was an issue back then. Hopefully not now. This was the 10th anniversary celebration of Stonewall, and the book is entitled TC's Lesbian Shorts, after another of the short stories that I called The Shorts. It's available from Amazon. Here we go. I will just say that I think that if you're going to write something of interest and to talk about gay pride in one breath and then not allow it to be recorded so that a wide audience can watch if they wish, is a bit of a paradox. So, TC was looking for her friends in a jumble of people who'd gathered at the temple on the Thames embankment. She was late as usual. TC wasn't going to be seen in public without having paid due attention to her appearance, and a last-minute change of trousers had ensured that late arrival. It was a bright day, lots of balloons, bags, badges and banners, a good mood prevailing, but TC could not see her friends. "They're probably near the front of the march behind Lesbian line," she said to Daisy. Her usual philosophic approach to life kicked in. "Oh well, we might as well find another group of women to march with," and looked at the fairly fast-walking throng. They were mostly men. Their banners proclaimed that they were gay teachers, or the Winchester Campaign for Homosexual Equality, or South East Region gay students. I think most of our London groups went first. TC took Daisy's hand and tried to walk through the multitude of marchers at a slightly quicker pace in an attempt to get forward, but soon found it to be an impossibility. The marchers were quite close together, and about 4 or 5 more in rough lines from the curb across the middle of the road. "We'll look for another women's group, there must be one." She'd looked forward to carrying one of her own Lewisham group's banners, "Every woman can be a lesbian," or "Lesbians Ignite," or even one with the 2 women's symbols interlocking. It was new then. At this point she'd have been happy to spot the Brixton Fairies. At least they were men she knew and liked. Then she came to a clearing in the men. A group of women, bannerless, but obviously a group, as they were all dressed in similar androgynous style, in nondescript jeans and tops, with cardigans either on or round their shoulders, together with sensible working shoes. They did not smile when they saw TC and Daisy. TC had been welcomed by all the men as she'd walked through, but she wasn't going to march with any kind of men on such an occasion. Only last week she'd loudly remonstrated with the councillor who sat with her on the North Lewisham Law Centre Committee, TC was the Women's Aid appointee, for calling her love during a debate. The becardiganed viewed her with suspicion. TC smiled. "I lost my mates. They're down the front, I think, behind Switchboard or Lesbian line, so we'll walk with you." They didn't seem too keen. TC, being thick-skinned in the extreme, registered their hauteur, but as they were all on the move and she was unlikely to find Evelyn and the others in the mass of marchers, and as she'd have had to run anyway to do it, she decided to continue with the discomfited ones, albeit on the driver's side of the road. It could have been the leather motorcycle jacket, or the haircut, or the gleaming double-edged axe, a labrys dangling menacingly from one ear, or the heavy bike chain dangling from her belt to her trouser pocket, on the end of which an ominous bulge looked like it could have been a Swiss Army knife. It was, as well as keys. Or it could have been the little conventionally dressed 9-year-old girl she'd brought with her, or all of these. Regardless, TC was determined to have a good time, and make sure her daughter enjoyed this historic day in 1979. It had been 10 years since the Stonewall Fightback, as the badges nearly everybody was wearing declared Stonewall 10th anniversary. It was the night of June the 27th, 28th, when the mostly young regulars, forced by discriminatory legislation to gather in secretive lesbian and gay venues such as the Stonewall Inn on Christopher Street in New York, decided that enough was enough of the constant and violent raids on their club, and instead of succumbing as usual to the police brutality and harassment, decided to fight it. In those days it was actually illegal for men to dance together. Women were ignored as per, and a man had to wear at least 3 items of male apparel, or he could be arrested for cross-dressing. On this night the police had arrested the bartender, the doorman, and some drag queens. The other customers began to physically and verbally resist these arrests, and the fracas spilled out onto the street outside. The fight, involving about 400 patrons, escalated as hundreds of others were drawn to the scene from other gay clubs, and "Gay Power" was chanted for the first time in 1969 at that Stonewall Club fightback. At the end of this night of protest, 13 people had been arrested, 2 rioters had been severely beaten, and many more injured by the police. The fighting continued every night for the next week and changed the gay and lesbian perceptions of themselves as powerless against the homophobic status quo and those who denigrated them on the grounds of their sexual orientation forever. The streets of London weren't exactly lined with cheering well-wishers either. You couldn't exactly see much anyway, for the police marching alongside, studiedly po-faced and stoic of attitude. 1,500 police, and although this was the most number of marchers for gay pride ever in Europe, it was still about 1 police officer to every 10 marchers. There were lots of photographers and some film cameras as TC contemplated her isolated lot in the midst of the many. Daisy said she wanted the bathroom. TC told her to hold on till they got to Hyde Park. As their section got to Whitehall near Downing Street, Daisy began to grizzle. "Don't cry, they'll think it's because your mother's a lesbian. Try to smile. Look at all those cameras taking photos of us." Daisy still grizzled. The other women who'd been walking in their group were quite a way away from TC and her child, who'd insisted she'd wanted to come on this march when TC had hosted the last meeting. "It sounds so exciting, Mummy, do let me come with you." All the others agreed it was a good and empowering thing to do, and so today's march for TC definitely wasn't going to plan. If only they hadn't been late. TC's contingent were almost first to move off, so she reckoned about half a mile in front of her. Still, she enjoyed the atmosphere and the shouted questions of some of the men echoing down the line, with the crowd responding loudly. "Do you want aversion therapy? No. Do you want sympathy? No. Do you want psychiatric aid? No." Daisy had stopped sniffling. Those shouts had done the trick. "We'll be there soon," TC assured her. She couldn't wait herself to get into the park and find her friends. At last they reached the park gates, where all the marchers broke ranks as they entered and did their own thing. Ahead of TC and Daisy was a huge stage, fenced round, making a kind of green grassy moat, a clear space between performers and audience. Then there was a large tree. "Quick, go behind that, Daisy," TC pointed. She'd spotted the others already in the front row up against the fencing facing the stage. Daisy came out from behind the tree, holding the hand of a buxom, smiling young woman. "I couldn't believe it when I saw Daisy," Carol told TC. "How long have you been here?" "I just got in. I lost the others. They're over there. Must have been here ages. I got to the assembly point late." "Oh, I didn't go on the march. I just came straight here for the concert and fun." Carol was one of TC's ex-girlfriends. They'd had quite a thing between them. Then it had been interrupted by Carol's prison sentence. TC had visited her in Holloway a couple of times, and once she'd taken Daisy, who'd always liked her. Carol liked Daisy a lot too. Prison changed her though, and after her release, TC and she had only got it together once, and the dynamics had changed, rendering it inauspicious to do it again. They'd remained on friendly terms, if somewhat distantly. Carol accompanied TC and Daisy to where the Lewisham Collective was standing. Polly Perkins compared to rapturous applause and introduced Tom Robinson, who sang Sing If You're Glad to Be Gay, with everyone joining in. Polly Perkins had spotted TC even before she sent over a note telling her that she and Daisy had arrived and whereabouts they were standing, and came across the moat. Nice to see you, TC, and great that you brought Daisy too. And with that she got Daisy, who'd been lifted over the fence and who afterwards had a little dance with a couple of TC's mates, and took her off to meet Tom Robinson and the other artists. TC was on the BBC News that evening, and she saw it herself on the nighttime news too. She knew that because a neighbour's daughter, a friend of Daisy's, had called that information out to them as they walked up the path to their house. "I saw you on the 6 o'clock news," she said very, very loudly for all to hear. The cameras had zoomed in on her leather-clad figure, giving the clenched fist salute of the women's liberation movement, punching the air in triumph as she sang loudly, "Sing if you're glad to be gay, sing if you're happy this way." The sedate group TC had walked along with had stayed quite a way away from all this merrymaking and still managed to look disdainful. TC wondered whether these internecine arguments about what constituted appropriate dress, behaviours, lifestyles for lesbians would ever be resolved in the interests of progress. Maybe by the 20th birthday of Stonewall in 1989, she conjectured. I wonder if Daisy will want to come to that. Well, the march is featured on a couple of BBC documentaries. You remember the filming? World in Action and Inside Out, and you can catch a glimpse of Daisy and TC in both. And in fact, I videoed a clip. I had to change the names to protect the guilty, of course. And here I couldn't find our 10th birthday, which it was with a cake on it, badge, but I could find this 20th birthday anniversary celebration badge that Kathy and I wore at the 1989 march, because although Daisy was doing her own thing by that time, 10 years later, Kathy, who as many people know is my partner of so many years now, was with me on that march, and this is one of our badges that we saved from that. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to this story, and to know that, you know, pride means pride. It means it's the opposite to shame. And if you are going to be a writer, or if you write or you speak on behalf of gay pride, I'd suggest that you allow your words to be heard by the public at large, and not creep about and not let people hear what you have to say, or only in a closed way, a closeted way, dare I say it, a closet. Well, there you are. Love and light to all. I hope that if you are a gay person, especially if you're a lesbian, and I'm talking about who identifies as that, and for me as a woman, born a woman, it's very important to me. My sexual orientation has always been very important, and I'm glad to be out and proud of that. So I hope you like that story, and there are many more where that came from, of course, and I'll say goodbye for now, and fight the good fight.